This is the Capitol Rundown.
Michigan is going to be in the general election much more important.
People love their libraries. They love their librarians. They have a trust level.
We're in the midst of a little game of chicken going on. As you know, the Democrats have the votes to pass the budget, but they need Republican votes to make it effective immediately.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Siobhan Klepper. We're going to jump right into Michigan politics this week with a poll that asks a few questions that haven't really been asked before, and they shed some light on what Michiganders think about what's happening in Lansing. But we're going to start with the basic question. How's Michigan doing? When asked if things in Michigan are generally headed in the right direction or have things pretty seriously gotten off on the wrong track, almost half of those surveyed say we are headed in the right direction, while a little more than a third say we are on the wrong track. The other 17% didn't know or wouldn't say. They're also feeling pretty good about the way Governor Gretchen Whitmer is doing her job. When asked how they would rate her job performance, 52% said she was doing pretty good or excellent, while 44% said she was just fair or poor. Then comes the question we haven't heard before. When asked what they thought of the Democratic lawmakers at the Capitol in Lansing, more of the people polled saw them favorably than not. 42% see them in a good light, while 36% do not. But their counterparts across the aisle didn't fare as well. You could say they're underwater, as only 1 out of 3 give a favorable opinion of them, while 42% do not. About a quarter of those surveyed for each question were undecided or didn't volunteer an opinion. Those numbers are good news for Michigan Democrats. They spent most of the last 4 decades in the legislative minority, but now that they're in charge of both chambers, they've had a busy first 4 months in office. They've passed numerous bills trying to crack down on gun violence, and they also repealed the right-to-work bills the GOP passed when they were in charge. Pollster Bernie Porn says the numbers show that Michiganders like what they're seeing.
Is more likely to have been in the 30s in the past. And now to have 42%, that is an indication that the public believes that Democrats with Governor Whitmer are accomplishing what their agenda is. And
another area where Democratic lawmakers have been active is abortion. Although voters enshrined the right to have an abortion in the state's constitution last fall, that didn't stop lawmakers from repealing a 1931 law that could have outlawed abortion before last fall's proposition passed. So while their bill was largely a symbolic one, it too goes along with the will of the voters if you believe the polls. When asked if they think of themselves as pro-choice or consider themselves pro-life, 57% of those surveyed said they favored abortion rights, while about a third say they'd call themselves pro-life. Around 1 in 10 didn't know or wouldn't say. Our pollster has been asking that question for years, and those numbers have stayed relatively consistent over time. But while the Michigan Constitution and public sentiment seem stacked against them, that doesn't mean pro-life supporters are giving up the fight. This week, they released a video. It's not necessarily meant to change laws, but the head of the group Protect Life Michigan says it's designed to change minds.
I bet you believe in human rights. But what if I told you the greatest human rights violation is happening right here in America, taking thousands of lives every day?
We have groups of human beings that we have treated as different or other, sometimes based on their race or based on their religion. With the unborn, it's their age.
Abortion is a human rights violation. We're talking about a violent procedure that either starves or dismembers a living human being. How do you fit this violence into your worldview that says that human rights are valuable?
Now the poll we've been talking about also had a bunch of questions about an issue that's been in the headlines recently, people who want to ban books from libraries. So the Michigan Library Association paid for a poll to find out how people feel about it, and we wanted to share some of the results with you. When asked who should be the people who make decisions about which books should be included in public library collections, 6 out of 10 people said either library boards or librarians. Almost 1 in 10 said it should be members of the community, and just 7% said it should be state lawmakers or other elected officials. When asked about their views about banning books, almost 90% of those polled said it should either happen rarely or not at all. They were divided almost evenly. Most of the rest said there are many inappropriate books that should be banned. And when asked whether they think banning books is un-American or whether books that are anti-American, anti-police, and hostile to family values should not be in libraries, 7 out of 10 said banning books was un-American. 2 out of 10 said books critical of American ways should be removed, and the rest didn't or wouldn't say. The head of the Michigan Library Association says she's heartened by the results.
People love their libraries. They love their librarians. They have a trust level. And I think that we knew that there was this vocal minority, very loud vocal minority at our school board meetings, at our library board meetings, and pleasantly surprised, that we have these great numbers.
All the poll numbers we've talked about so far were from a survey done by the Lansing firm Epic MRA. They checked in with 800 people across the state between March 23rd and 30th, giving them a margin of error of plus or minus 3.5%. Well, still ahead, we are going to catch you up on another busy week in Michigan politics when we check in with our Capitol correspondent, Tim Skubic. That discussion is next on the Capitol Rundown. Welcome back. It's now time to check in on Michigan politics with Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic. Jorma Duran asked him about how lawmakers might be able to pass a budget, but might have some trouble putting it into practice. But they started their conversation with another topic: how to keep the Capitol safe.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skubic, to give us the lowdown. Tim, I've been hearing reports that there are moves being made at the state capitol to try to make that building a little bit more secure. What do you know?
Well, here's the deal. There is a group called the State Capitol Commission. They are charged with the day-to-day operation of the state capitol. And recently they voted to have bids come in on really hardening the state capitol, putting at all 5 entrances of the building devices that would determine if you're walking in the building with a gun or a weapon or whatever. And of course, if you are, you're going to be stopped by the cops, and you're going to be asked to leave because guns are banned in the Capitol. This is a huge reversal in the attitude that has been prevalent in our town for decades, which has been this. This is the people's house, the legislature. And at people's houses, they don't have metal detectors. They don't have AI equipment to keep weapons out. So why should we do that here? And of course, that philosophy 30 years ago worked, because we didn't have mass shootings, but now we do. And the attitude has changed, and the commission says it is time for us to change.
Well, if anybody knows you do, what do you know about the state budget? Where are we?
Well, we're in the midst of a little game of chicken going on. As you know, the Democrats have the votes to pass the budget, but they need Republican votes to make it effective immediately. Yeah. And basically what it means is, let's say, for example, that they passed the $20 billion school aid budget and they put it into law. But if 6 Republicans in the state Senate don't come along with them and vote yes, the money doesn't go out until over a year from now. I'm going to guess that the schools are not going to be happy with that. And here's what's going on. The Republicans are now in the minority. The only leverage, the only negotiating power that they have is go to the Democrats and say, you've got to give us X, Y, and Z in the budget, or we won't give you those votes for immediate effect. And so that's the game that's going on right now. They are shooting to get the school aid budget, for example, done by July the 1st, which is when the school boards need the information from the state as to how many dollars they're going to get so they can write their budgets. And my guess is this game of chicken will go on for a while, and an exchange of programs will be made, and one way or the other they will get this thing done. But right now, the soup is on the stove. There's a lot of stuff in it, but it's not boiling yet. So we'll keep an eye on the pot and see when it does boil.
Tim, Jorma, thank you. Well, coming up, it is not even halfway through 2023, but election 2024 is already heating up. We're going to talk to one of President Biden's campaign co-chairs when the Capitol Rundown returns. At the beginning of the show, we told you how Michiganders felt about people and politicians across the state. We're going to dip back into the numbers and show you how they feel about some national leaders. And we're going to start at the top with President Joe Biden. When asked how he's doing on the job, the numbers are almost 2-to-1 against him. Only a third of those asked gave him a positive rating, while just shy of 2/3 gave him a -1. Only if you didn't know or wouldn't say. And that could be why President Biden has already announced, well, who has already announced that he's running for re-election, has already released his second TV ad. It's running in 8 states, including Michigan. It's called Backbone, and the minute-long commercial is focused on the president's economic agenda. Take a look.
Joe Biden is determined to reward hard work. That's why he passed historic laws that rebuild our roads and bridges, invest in our factories, and bring back American manufacturing. Over 12 million jobs have been created, and Joe Biden's building an economy that leaves no city, no town, no American behind.
We're investing in places and people that have been forgotten. They've been invisible.
But there might be a silver lining for Mr. Biden. Even though more Michiganders dislike him than like him by a margin of 51-39, they dislike former president and potential challenger Donald Trump even more. Only 32% of those polled have a favorable opinion of Mr. Trump, while 58% don't. 10% were undecided on each. We had a chance to catch up with Congressman Jim Clyburn to talk about the race. The longtime South Carolina Democrat is one of the national co-chairs for the Biden campaign. We asked him whether he thought we'd see a rematch in 2024.
Well, the odds look pretty good that it will be a rematch, but that's just the odds. I don't think it's good that there is if there is to be a rematch. I don't think that's good for the country. I think that both these men will be running on their records. And I think that the record of Joe Biden compared to the record of 45 or as different as night and day. And it looks as if Joe Biden will be running on his record of service to the people of this country. There's no telling which one of those records that 45 will be running on. I always say that campaigns are about the future. And irrespective of the fact that I think that Joe Biden's record is a good one, I do believe that his vision for the future is even better. This country was found on some principles that it has not always lived up to, but a principle that states we should always be in pursuit of, and that is a more perfect union. And I think that is very clear to the American people. That with the past administration, this country got away from that principle. And Joe Biden's election, I think, was an attempt on the part of the voters to get us back on track. I think that every election is a referendum on the performance of the candidates, on the records of the candidates. And I am a big proponent of Joe Biden's admonition. Let's not compare Joe Biden to the Almighty. Let's compare him to the alternative. Let's look at the record of Joe Biden, line it up against the record of the alternative candidate. And I think if we do that, our country will stand in good stead, not just for us, but for our children and our grandchildren.
Coming up next on The Rundown, we're going to get Congressman Clyburn's take on Michigan's role in 2024. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Iowa and New Hampshire. For most of our recent political history, presidential campaigns for both parties started in those two states, and how candidates did there would often make or break a candidate. But at least for Democrats, that's about to change. The new calendar will look something like this. South Carolina will go first, followed by New Hampshire and Nevada on the same day, then Georgia, then a full 2 weeks before Michigan. So we asked South Carolina Congressman and Biden presidential co-chair Jim Clyburn about the importance of Michigan in the primary and in November of 2024.
It is great for Michigan to move up in the schedule. I think it's great for South Carolina to be where it is. And I understand why. When I saw Michigan being moved up, Georgia being moved up, I was a happy fellow. It wouldn't have mattered to me if Michigan or Georgia had gone first.
How important do you think the Michigan is going to be when it comes to the general election, where obviously we have been, continue to be one of the swing states?
Michigan is going to be in the general election much, much, much more important than South Carolina. No question about that. Not just because of its size, not just because of its diversity, but also because of its general election status. We got a much better chance of picking up electoral votes coming out of Michigan than we have coming out of South Carolina.
How important do you think the next election is to the future of this country?
This is the second most important election ever. The first one was 2020. That, to me, was a little more important than this one coming up, but not by much. That is because we were facing with trying to change the direction of the country, and we did that. Now we've got to keep it going.
Stick around. We're going to wrap up the rundown when we come back. If you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, we've got just the thing. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at your screen right now. That will take you to the sign-up page, or you can head to WLNS.com/newsletter. And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown.